Welcome to Nourishing the Mother, an inspired conversation space between Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner on the journey of motherhood through the common thread of parenting, relationship, and sexuality as a path to consciousness.
We keep our conversations honest, our experiences real, and our philosophies exploratory. We believe that in order to raise incredible humans, we first have to raise ourselves. We know that in order to rock the family, you've got to nourish the mother. If you are here, you care about paving a path of conscious and intentional motherhood, connected with yourself and your gifts, and also illuminating your children in theirs so we may raise more whole humans who can impact this world in a more humane way.
If you desire to integrate your learnings practically and supportively, head on over to bridgetwood.life or julietenner.love to go deeper. And for all live-streamed pre-release podcasts and all our free content, head over to our free Facebook group, Nourishing the Mother with Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner. We are Julie Tenner and Bridget Wood, and we are so grateful you're here.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Bridget Wood.
And I'm Julie Tenner. And today's podcast is how to know your overwhelm is a problem and what to do about it. And we're joined by a very special guest, Sharon Joy, and we're going to read out her bio in a minute so you can place who she is and where she be in the world. And then we invite you to fully sink into a conversation around what overwhelm might look like for you, how it's showing up and creating problems or manifestations in your life, and how we can hopefully guide a conversation that allows you places to move with it. So we're very excited to have this conversation, aren't we, Bridgie?
We really are. We really are. So Sharon is a business and mindset coach and website designer, coaching and creating websites for coaches, consultants, healers, and spiritual women. She is the founder of Studio of Soul and has a background in educational leadership and marketing, previously working as the Australian marketing manager for a global lifestyle brand and primary school deputy principal. She started her first business in 2018 and since then has had a number of entrepreneurial ventures. Sharon is a certified master neurolinguistic programming master practitioner.
NLP.
That was an NLP practitioner, time-based and EQ therapist and strategic coach. She is a partner of the popular website platform Wix, reaching icon level. She's also a certified soul modes mentor and openly admits to being reels obsessed. I love it.
I'd also like to add into here that Sharon Joy is also my business coach. And so part of the reason that we have her on here is because, as you know, we are very, very selective about who we bring to you in this podcast because we hold it as incredibly sacred ground and we're here to always evolve with spaces of integrity. And so the people that we have on align with those beliefs as well. So working with Sharon, I have found incredibly potent because she has an incredible mix of being able to ground and anchor some most wonderful points, call you out on the BS, which as you know, as you all know as listeners, I love, 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 and I love sometimes a little bit of a whippy sting. And that's exactly what I find in Sharon, which keeps me grounded and able to show up as I do. So one of the conversations that we had was around overwhelm. And because of her background, I was like, oh my God, this is the conversation we have to take to the world. And Bridgie was like, gosh, yeah, we do. This is manifesting in all of the places and spaces. So I just want to give you the background on how we've come to being here. So welcome, Sharon.
Thank you so much. Thank you, both of you, for having me here.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. So I think what would be a beautiful place to start is just how you see overwhelm. And I know that you have a way of defining what is normal overwhelm and what is classified as, for you, problematic overwhelm from what you see with working with women in entrepreneurial business spaces. Can you just give us a little riff on that?
Yeah, I think probably one of the main things that I notice with overwhelm is it's individual to each person. So it's very unique. It doesn't come with one specific set of behaviors, but there's definitely common behaviors that, you know, people demonstrate when they're in a state of overwhelm. I tend to find that with my clients, most of the people I work with are feminine core beings. And I find that a lot of those people often have lots of feminine energy in their world and in their work in the world. And so often their default tends to very much be falling on the side of overwhelm versus those people who tend to fall more with masculine energy, which tends to be more overwork. So they tend to be at opposite ends of the spectrum. So very commonly, the types of things that I find with people that I work with who experience this sense of overwhelm, there's two different types, like you alluded to, Jules. So we've got there's one group where we have reasonable reason at times in life to feel overwhelmed. We don't need to make up any stories that overwhelm is abnormal or there's anything wrong with it, or generally speaking that it's problematic. So we can all just let that go. At some time we all experience some level of natural overwhelm that has us feeling all out at sea, and that's totally fine. On the other hand, there is groups of people who do tend to run a habitual program of overwhelm, which then becomes problematic. And I guess that often looks like, sort of getting up and doing the thing, and then all of a sudden we fall in a heap again. And the types, so when I say fall in a heap, it's different for everybody. So, some of the generalized symptoms, I guess you could say, of overwhelm might look like, scrolling aimlessly on a phone, avoidance, really, doing other things. So for some people, it might be shopping or overeating or, those tasks that generally have us avoiding what we really know deep down that we should be doing. Not having those hard conversations, not taking care of our body, really just even in our thoughts, so there's like behaviors, but there's also thoughts that we run, and, they're usually catastrophizing. They're usually making the whole situation far worse than what it is. And it's habitual. So, those people who have that cycle of problematic overwhelm tend to run the same cycle over and over and over and over. And ultimately, they end up kind of in places and spaces where they're not really wanting to be in their life. So they'll find themselves and look around and think, gee, this is not what I really want. So then we have, that perpetuates a whole other level of feeling and emotion, particularly guilt, because they know they're not doing the thing, but they kind of end up trapped in this cycle, unable to free themselves from it. So, overwhelm we all experience is very normal. And I also think it's fair to say is that there's this crossover between normal levels of overwhelm, and then sometimes we can, at a period in our life, experience habitual problematic overwhelm. And it might be for a period of time where we're avoiding dealing with something, or, there might be some other factor in our life that has us procrastinating and feeling all, yeah.
Thank you for that. Gosh, I can so both see myself in aspects of that and also recognize where I pull myself out of it, and the times, of course, when we are better at doing that and not so good at doing it. And I wonder if you can kind of share in your experience of working with women who fall into this category, if how much of them falling into this is because they're actually not prioritizing potentially the very things that are important to them. So then they just push themselves into it and only give them permission when they're in overwhelm. Is that part of what you see as well?
Yeah, I definitely think that's part of it. The other thing that I would say is part of it is often, people who are experiencing this cycle of overwhelm are not actually aware that they're in it. So it's often not until it's spiraled well out of control. And we could be talking years here, I've certainly, worked with women and had, people just people generally that I know who have had years and years and years of this type of program that they run. And, I don't even want to say necessarily behavior. Behavior is part of it, but there's also other underlying things like the thoughts, the feelings, the emotion, that runs with that. So I would say that, it can run and they're not realizing that they're running it. And that again is problematic versus, like right now, I feel really overwhelmed. This is what I need to do to help get myself out of it. So, when we're consciously aware of it, and Bridget, from what you've said, it sounds very much like you have a very clear process for going, I recognize this pattern.
I'm doing it again.
I'm in it. And you might be in it too deep, but you have that level of conscious awareness that has you know and understand, hey, I need to get myself out of this. So I would say that probably falls more into that category of normal life overwhelm that we can sometimes find ourselves in deeper than what we want to be in. But, when we have that level of awareness, we can more easily bring ourselves out of that, versus when we actually sometimes don't actually know that, to give you an example, it's often when, and there's been times in my life, even when I've experienced this, but I'll just speak generally about, people who perhaps have been doing the things, going through the motions, and they're not happy in their life. And it's almost like, and legitimately from the outside looking in, it's like, yeah, this person, there's always something going wrong for them, and it's sort of like often it brings about, greater things in their world that are problematic. And it's almost dialed up as a result of their overwhelm because they struggle to manage the smaller things, which means it manifests bigger things and really spirals out of control. So, certainly finding ways to understand, recognize, hang on a minute, I recognize this program, and being able to pull ourselves out of it is really, really powerful.
Are there certain areas of women's lives where you see that play out? Because as you're talking, I'm certainly thinking that there'd be many women who have potentially a money story like that, or like, I won't look at that because that's all just too hard and I don't want to see that. So I'll not go there and avoid it with my habitual overwhelm practice until that becomes so painful and so catastrophic that I then have to deal with it. Would that be an example of an area of life that you might see come up?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'd probably say that quite often, you could almost match their behavior with that. Quite often if that's their state of overwhelm and neglect, that they don't want to deal with that situation, then you'll probably find, that their behavior might be overspending, and so it's always perpetuates the cycle, right? Yeah. So definitely, it can manifest in all areas. I mean, sometimes it might be particularly, I find with my clients, it's in administration. It's because I work with soul-led women, and it doesn't light them up to do stuff that requires a level of masculine energy, that requires them to build the structure. They want a free flow. They want, but free flow very quickly turns into free fall without a net. And that's not always a nice place to be, right? Because when they're free falling, then, it's like that gasping for breath and that feeling of fear and finding themselves in places that aren't well supporting them. So, but unfortunately, that's often the work that they reject and avoid, and go into overwhelm over. The woe is me, I don't want to do the techie stuff, or I don't want to do the structured stuff. I just want to be free and breezy, which is beautiful. But what they don't realize is that there's a lot more peace in setting the thing and then being able to swirl it within it, And I mean, you think about it, let's take the home life, for example, let's take, as Jules says, family Inc. What happens when, the shopping, the cooking, the meal planning, the organization of who's taking which kid where. What happens when we avoid dealing with that? Very quickly, we find ourselves in a place that is even worse than what it needs to be. If we put those things into place and those structures into place, then we can actually find a whole lot of joy in doing all of that stuff because we have a system and a process. And I think that that's the thing with overwhelm is it's a process. Overwhelm is a process. It's an unfortunate process that we run. We'll probably dig a little bit more into that.
It's so interesting to me. So even as we're avoiding structure and processes, we're actually creating them in our overwhelm process.
Yeah.
Like we're not without structure, right? Or process. It just doesn't look like structured process because
it sounds like
someone else does.
Well, that's the process.
It's maladaptive, right? It's like you've got an adaptive process, like an adaptive process that you might build versus like if you haven't built the one that you know that is adaptive for your own growth, then you've got the maladaptive one that then means that you're largely facing a shit show. If we use the example of family, like trying to get a family out a door with zero process.
Yeah.
It's just going to be full of emotion and dysregulation.
Yeah. But there is a legitimate process that is unstructured, chaotic, like that in itself is a process. And I guess that's the thing about overwhelm is if I said, and I do say this to clients, if I want to do overwhelm like you, how do I do it? Like if I want to be the world champ of overwhelm, tell me what that looks like. Like, teach me. I want to know. And guaranteed, they can tell you everything that they break down, like the scrolling, the avoidance, the thought processes that come behind it, which is usually attached to negative self-talk or, negative thoughts about external factors. They can break it all down. And so whenever we can have a process for for chaos, like not running Family Inc. or for overwhelm, then we can also rewrite that and create a process that is going to be supportive and going to help us come out of overwhelm or manage the things that we need to do with greater levels of joy.
I have actually so many questions that I want to dig into here. So I'm just first off wanted to ask you one, Bridgie. Which was from sort of having that universal law perspective. How do you see this fitting in terms of people manifesting a lot of drama and heightened things outside of them that mean, in inverted commas, they can't do the thing they say they want to be able to do?
I think, a couple of things with that. They may be actually unconsciously addicted to the chemical cocktail that they're getting from it, so that like they're actually getting something from that overwhelm, right? Like sometimes we'll pick a fight with someone to wake ourselves up. We don't know that that's why we're doing it, but we're doing it. It's maladaptive, but we've found a way to get our outcome, which was to feel lit up in our body. So similar with an overwhelm pattern, it might be like, like that drama cycle. Like I feel important when somebody, I don't know, tears me down because I get to feel self-righteous. Or, I feel like someone's going to come and at least look after me and see my struggle when I'm like, can't cope with the kids, right? So it'll be something that you've learned unconsciously that you're gaining something from. And so until you have some kind of process that still allows you to see that you can get those things elsewhere, you'll still continue to do them. But I would also say that all of us are going to have a conservation. So there'll be things which are utter chaos and disorganized, and then there'll be things which we will have order in. So Julie, for you, for example, maybe 5 or 10 years ago, you would have said that your finance was chaos, right? You didn't want to see it, you didn't want to look at it. But my God, the order in your relationships and the structure in your communication was top notch and couldn't be faulted, right? Like there was such a structure and process to that. So those two were in balance. So sometimes if you're listening and you're thinking, oh God, that's me. Sometimes part of pulling ourselves out of it is also looking at, okay, well, where is there where am I? The opposite. But also don't let yourself off the hook of seeing there is still some structure I could bring here. This is what I really want to empower.
Yeah, well, let's take my money one, right? So it wasn't even in my top 10 values. Wasn't even in them.
Yeah.
And then there's more month than money at the end of our month.
Yeah.
Right. So the pain, the pain, the suffering, and I will say the addictive process of overwhelm, of turning up to the shops and not knowing if I'm going to be able to buy groceries or if there's enough blah, 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 or how am I going to pay for the blah, blah, blah. Like there's a level of the more that I've avoided the thing, the bigger the monster's gotten, which at that point in time, I was still avoiding the monster because I'm like, well, this is my life. You know, I'm a stay-at-home mum. This is truth. This is reality. And so I want to look at that with two different lenses. And I mean, you two, I'll do my rant and then you feel free to chime on in. I can look at that from two places, which is that was all I knew. So that's what I'd grown up with. That was my blueprint for what it looked like to be in a family. That was it. That's what it looked like. More month than money, never enough money. No one can ever get their needs met. Often there's not even enough for food. That's my blueprint. And that was definitely what I grew up with as a childhood experience. And that was definitely the experience, certainly of my mother, maybe less so for my dad. I don't know enough about his family to be able to say that with certainty. But that's my blueprint. And the circle, if you're the product of the 5 people you spend the most time with, the circle that I was in, except for you, Bridgie, you were the first financially empowered person that I let into my life. And I say let in because it's not like they didn't exist.
Yeah, but that you were willing to kind of allow into the fold.
That I was willing to love. Because up until that point in time, I was very good at creating a them and us story, you know, the haves and the have-nots, which was what I had grown up with, particularly in England, as very clear socialism, like very clear social lines, classism. Yeah. So, and I married into a family who deeply valued financial wealth and all of the trappings that came with it. So anytime I was around that, I rejected it and concocted an entire story that made me right in my top values. Well, that means you don't invest in your children. And that means you don't really care. And that means you're not really emotionally invested. And that means you're shallow. So therefore you're nothing like me. I cannot be around you. You're intolerable. Like versions of. So I had a fantastic strategy for making sure that I was never around people that I felt minimized around personally. Like I minimized myself in those spaces of financial empowerment, right? So I can see both those things happening. And then I meet Bridgie, who knows way more than I know and has a blueprint that's completely different to mine. And it was the first time that I had ever opened up to going, wow, it's like there's something else. It's like I've grown up and it's not truth. Like, what? Which, of course, you could apply to any other area of life.
It's just like when you have that like moment, isn't it just like worlds just colliding together and exploding? And like it's like their reality.
What if everything I thought was true isn't? Yeah, totes. So there's the blueprint, and you can keep running that, right? I could choose to have kept money not in my top values, to never have considered it, and to maintain that chaos. I could choose to maintain the chaos, or I could choose that was more painful for me and out of alignment with the life that I really wanted to be living, not the life that was defined from where I'd come from, the life that my soul wanted to live. And I get to choose. And it doesn't mean it's going to be easy. It's a shit ton of patterning that I have to break down and find another pathway for, a shit ton of nervous system and body regulation, of changing beliefs, because I had the beliefs of the person that created the behaviors and the reality of not enough money. So to be the Bridget of the world, I had different relationships to money. And I had different, like it's different, right? Your reality is the product of your belief system. So, yes, that's correct. So I want to say I get the overwhelm, but we also get to choose, is this the life that I want? Because I can choose something different at any point in time. Is this the reality that I choose? And if it's not the reality that you want, then something's going on there. because your beliefs and your actions are not matching your wish and your dreams. And you are living the reality of the belief systems which dictate the actions now, right? So I love what you're saying, like both of you, because it speaks so clearly to, I get when we're in there, we can't see another way out. Like, this is, for me, like, this is truth. This is what it is. I can't change that. Like, this is what it is. I choose to be a stay-at-home mum. This is what it means. I'll sacrifice that. When in actual fact, it was a bullshit fucking strategy.
But it was a perfectly functional strategy for you. In order for you to maintain the beliefs that you had, that put the energy into your family that you wanted to at that point in time, to protect that worldview.
Yes.
Right? Because we also do that. We also go, oh, I have to, because we understand things by their opposite. So I almost have to perceive you're wrong. So it gives me the energy to put into what I think is right as well.
Totes.
Because if we don't have a bigger vision, we'll use the moving away from something to get us to where we want to go.
Yeah, totes. So when we think about, if we bring it back to this conversation around, I guess I just want to hang a little bit longer on how we become aware of it. Because particularly if we consider overwhelm, and particularly, I mean, the majority of all three of our clients are mothers who choose to mother with intention. So I do think that can get really hard when we perceive that we're at the mercy of life and children and needs, and that we're like, how could it possibly be different? Like, there's no other way. Like, I'm here, my kids are sick, I'm sick. I don't know, everyone had emotions today. It's all just really hard right now. Like, all of those patterns. And then you have the further addictive ones that are about drama, right? That I get those emotional rises. So I guess I want to just linger a little bit longer on when you're there and you're 100% sure reality could not be any different. What do we do? What do you reckon, Sharon? I'm going to start with you and then kick into you.
Yeah, I love that. And I just want to go back to, what you were both saying there. I mean, Bridget, I 100% agree with you. This problematic habitual overwhelm is an addiction. There is no doubt about it. And also, Jules, what you were saying is, it is a story that we're holding on to, right? This is a program that we've been programmed with a long time ago. It wasn't necessarily ours, but we've got it. And I think, when it comes to just deciding about, how am I going to get out of this, whilst, there's lots and lots of layers to this, at its simplest form, it's really just, this is my process for doing and running the overwhelm. What's my process when I'm not running it? Because even people who have habitual problematic overwhelm, it's still a cycle. There are moments, and albeit they may be very small, but there are still moments where they're not running that program. So what is it that they're doing in those moments that they can take clues from and apply that to other parts of their life? And I think even like, you were saying about, being in it, we can just decide to do and run something different. We can just say, no, this isn't a life that I'm living in alignment with the way that my soul wants to live. And therefore, I'm going to learn a new process. And that's it. Like that, it can be as simple as that. And there are obviously deeper layers, but it can be that simple. I mean, to give you an example, I had a 16-year career in education before I made a career change. And it was, teachers manage a lot of stuff, right? Like, I was a deputy principal of a very large school in southwestern Sydney. And, that was like, it was busy. It was really busy. And there was a lot of tasks on the go, had a lot of balls in the air at any one time, a million people walking through my office. It might be a parent, it might be a colleague, it might be a child. And so there were always things on the go. I had no decent system for project management. It was chaos. I did it. I'd learned to do it, and I ran that program like a mofo. Like, I had all those balls in the air, like, no problem. I did that thing, right? But what I know is the damage that actually did to my body, that living permanently in that state of high stress just because that was the program I was running. And yeah, everything kept ticking along. But man, it could have been so much better. So what did I do? Moving forward, when I changed careers and I moved more into the space of coaching, I knew that was a big part of my life that I wanted to nail, because I was like, I can't live like this. I need a better process for this. And so I went and got help, because I realized that I needed someone to actually break it down and teach me how to do it properly. And so I went and got a productivity coach, and I worked with a productivity coach and who just also happens to be an ex-teacher. But and I said to her, like, I want to know how you run all the things. Like, how do I run all the things?
You chose someone who was living the life that you wanted to be living.
100%.
You didn't choose the person who was still running chaos programs.
100%. And I modeled myself, and I learned her process. We can learn anything if we actually know what the process is for that thing. So equally, while we are, world-class champions at running overwhelm, problematic habitual overwhelm, or even just life overwhelm, we can still have a better process in the day-to-day to go, all right, I need to move my body through this right now so I can get to the other side of it and handle all this life situation that I'm dealing with. Instead of catastrophizing, instead of totally losing our shit, we can manage that better. And look, there's going to be times, right? Like, we all know that. But it's how we get out of it that has us living in alignment with what we really want. Because if we're not living in alignment with what we want and the way that our soul wants to live, then that's going to manifest in a whole heap of other ways.
Totally true. What would you add? Anything to that, Bridget?
I just was listening to what you're saying there, Sharon, and thinking about that, because there are consequences, right, to the chaotic overwhelm. Like, it might work on some level, but if it's not also life-giving as a process, then the body keeps the score. Like, I consider, my mum used to say, she was a teacher for 30 years, and she said, I don't think I breathed for 20 years. Like, she taught year 12 for 20 years and raised 2 kids. Like, and you can kind of go, how'd you do that? Like, I look back now and go, like, how did you do all of that? And she's like, I just don't think I breathed. No. And so I see her now in her, like, just turned 60, like, what she's having to work with in her body as a rehabilitation and reorienting back to her body after so long of living on that track. And I'm sure that there's mothers listening who live their motherhood like this, which is just, there's so much to manage and so many people to be something for, that I just can't even meet my needs. So I'll put them last, and then I'll get resentful, and then I'll yell, and that'll be the only way that I get anything done. But you're over here in cycles of guilt and shame because it's not where you want to be, but you don't have a way that's different or better than that which you find yourself in right now.
So true. And I can so resonate with what your mum was saying about not breathing. Like, that describes it beautifully, unfortunately. But this is the thing that we forget, like, the damage that we do to our bodies in our 20s and our 30s. Like, as someone who's now in my 40s, and I would say I've recently entered, going into that perimenopause phase of my life, I'm really like, how can I unravel some of this? Because I know, when you know better, you do better, but it's a bit late, because when I was doing back then, I was doing so much damage that has taken a long time. And I've been on this journey now since 2017, and I still have so much. I've got years and years of overwhelm to unravel in my life. And I didn't realize I was ever in overwhelm. I was so good at running that, and it was like having all the balls in the air all the time. Like, it was, fine, but it was actually not fine.
We're just interrupting this podcast to let you know what we've got going on. So to connect with me and all things raising you as a woman in motherhood and conscious parenting, join me at Reimagining Motherhood. And you, Jules?
At the moment, you can join Lover School, redefining pleasure, passion, and polarity in relationship. And you can find out more at julietenner.love. What about do you perceive that overwhelm can manifest as also apathy and resignation? Like I just can't, and I'm like exhausted, and the best self-love I could give myself is to sink into that and not do anything that I said I was going to do.
Oh, Jules. The audience is probably going to
I know, don't hate me.
Troll me for this. You holding me to this question because I think you know what my answer is going to be.
Delivering the sting right there.
Look,
only because let's just preface that with I can see that play out in my own overwhelm story, and I can see that in fact with the women that I work with is the biggest crux that they fall into. And I see that as holding them back rather than if we really knew what it meant to go inward, we wouldn't be in apathy and resignation. Yes, go inward is a feminine experience. Mm. Yes, enter the cave. Yes, go into the deep, dark forest, but purposefully and to reconcile. It's a very active process. Mm. It's not schlumping on the couch, fuck off life, I can't do anything. Yeah.
Complete collapse.
Yeah.
Oh, Jules, I love that you said that first. But, I back that. Like, I know I put myself out there on a limb a bit when I really, the matrescence movement, which I think is amazing. Like, I really fully support a movement back to supporting women into motherhood and, and also us as women returning to rest. Like, I'm all about that. But 100% agree with you. When we're using it as an excuse, and it does happen, I've seen it. I've coached women through it. Mm-hmm. It can be used as an excuse, and it does become a crux. And it doesn't look like going inward as an active participant. And there's the distinction, right? Like. It's not going inwards in a way that is an active participant and bringing forth what needs to be brought forth. It's avoidance. Yeah. But it's shrouded in, I'm just tired and I just need a rest. No, that's not it. You need to deal with this thing and then you won't feel as tired because often that's the cycle, right? We're not dealing with the thing, so we feel all tired and we need to rest and so it goes on. And again, I mean, it looks like catastrophizing, it looks like, but I'm just so tired. It's like, well, it's no wonder,
I guess running from yourself is exhausting.
It's exhausting. And also, I guess, problematizing. I don't even know.
Let's go with it, Bridgie.
Problematizing. Externalizing the problem to everything outside of you, like so that we say it's all the system's fault, or it's all patriarchy's fault, or it's all my husband who can't step up, or it's my children are neurodivergent and too hard, or whatever it is, right? And then we give the power that we have over to that. Not negating the fact that they may well be very challenging, but when we give too much power outside of ourselves, then we are therefore victim to that, and that very quickly downregulates our nervous system, and we don't have the energy then to rise up to that.
Yeah, and that's where we don't have a process for it. So if it's in managing those things, it's like, okay, I'm noticing this problem. I need to deal with, some of those problems that you just mentioned, Bridget. I need to put some things in place to help me claim back that power, and have a process that I control versus, the system and everything external of us hitting us in the face. I have an analogy that I often use around this, and for anyone who's ever driven on a corrugated road, it's quite an unpleasant experience. You feel the bumps in all different directions, boobs sort of bouncing all over the place, needing to be held, and it's quite uncomfortable. It quite, it shakes your tummy, and your cheeks wobble, and it's not nice. But the thing that's sitting in the overwhelm, that's being a passenger, right? Like that is actually allowing the world and all of the external things. So we're the ones that are crashing up against the rocks. But if we can actually become the driver and take the wheel and accelerate to a level of 80 Ks and above, then those problems are still there. But at that point on that corrugated road, it's like those corrugations disappear, and all of a sudden we can still recognize that they're there. We can see them. We can slightly feel them, but we're in control and we're able to float, much better and more easily through whatever it is that we're navigating.
I love that analogy. It's so good because it's true. It's like, and it's almost like a spinning top as well. Like a spinning top, if it slows down too much, it's going to fall over. Whereas if it speeds up, it's more buoyant and stable.
Yeah. I will also add to that, occasionally you do need to change the tires, right? They might need a little bit of extra inflation or maybe a tire change, but some new rubber. But hey, at the end of the day, that's the thing, is it's not allowing what's external of us to run the show. It's saying, right, I'm recognizing that I'm on this road, or I'm the one that's being thrown around like a rag doll with all of these things that are outside of me. How can I reclaim that and put a process in place so I can take back control and order and still enjoy life, because totally. Heck, I mean, we all deal with these types of things.
Yeah. And I wonder, Bridgie, if you'd agree with this too, that I think when we come to, I'm hoping that our listeners after this podcast really have an opportunity to be self-reflective and consider what your patterns and processes are for overwhelm, and just to ask yourself what the benefits are that you're getting. So as Sharon said at the beginning, and as Bridgie said, what is it that you are getting out of this process that otherwise you wouldn't get? So when I'm sick, that's when I learned that I'm allowed to rest. So if I'm sick more often, I'll actually get to rest more often because I don't let myself the rest of the time. When, there's crazy stuff happening with the kids or with life, then I get noticed by my mum friends and we can chat about it and there's social connection. When there's huge overwhelm with kids or with in-laws, it brings my husband and I, or my partner and I, closer together. So starting to get really clear on how this is benefiting you as a structure right now, because if you can't see the benefits, it's pretty hard to put in changes in that process to give you the same outcome, though be constructive rather than destructive in how you get there. But you have to know what you're shooting for first, right? So what is the thing that instead of waiting for this particular pattern to get, you can start to put in place and receive more through your life, so it's more of an even keel rather than this blood sugar high and starving and famine, feast and famine. So instead of that, what does it look like to give yourself more permission and freedom to receive those gifts in other ways that are more constructive for the life that you want to be living, right? So see your benefits. I love Sharon's idea of really tell me what if I had to become the world class, heavyweight lifter at your pattern of overwhelm, tell me what I'd do. Tell me how I'd get there. I love being able to strategize and see what we're doing. And then what do you think is the steps from there? So when we're talking about now you need to put in place new steps and new processes, what is the advice that you offer people when they're there, Sharon?
Well, I would say who's someone you could model off would be a great example. So, my husband and I have a great marriage. We've been married for 20 years this year, and we've been together for 28 years. We're high school sweethearts, and we have a fabulous marriage and relationship. And, we wanted to even take ourselves to greater heights. So, we looked to you, Jules, and Nick to find ways that we can even go to new heights, so actually finding people that you can model from is very, very powerful. What is it that they do? Ask them. When you, while you can ask yourselves, and I hope that your listeners do ask themselves what their process for overwhelm is, equally, ask somebody that they admire of something that they want to bring into their life. Hey, when you do that thing, can you tell me what it is that you do? And actually, get them to be really specific, because they've probably never been asked and they're on autopilot. Like people who are champions at this stuff, it's really hard to kind of reverse engineer and go, oh, no one's ever asked me that. But I bet if you scratch away at the surface long enough, they will be able to tell you the most in-depth, minute, mind-blowing, tiny little things that they do differently that never even occurred to you, that you're just like, you do what? Like, that's amazing, you know? Because they're things that people never, ever imagined. And I mean, I guess it's like, Jules, I know you're launching Lovers School at the moment. And, you know, I know we've had a conversation about this with, you know, like sex versus the intimacy, and where, you know, a lot of people might be perceiving, oh, it's about the sex. And you're like, no, it's not. It's actually about the desire and the chemistry and the energy. And they're like, what? Like, break that down for me, you know? And that's the thing. Like, often it's not what we think it is, you know? So we'll see somebody doing something amazing and we want to go and model it. But when they actually break it down, there's a whole heap of stuff behind the curtain that, unless we ask them to pull the curtain back, we don't even know exists, right? Because we only see what's in front of the curtain. And that's what's really interesting, is like modeling off other people. And get, like, if it doesn't matter what it is, get coaching about it, you know, like find somebody who can help you. There's coaching for everything these days, right? Like, you know, we've got coaches to help us how we can be better mothers and, you know, better lovers. Like, how awesome. Like, what a wonderful world that we live in, right? Like, there's be better at productivity, because I sucked at it or I didn't. From the external, people thought I was all over it, but I was like, no, I'm not all over it. I'm just running like stress and running my body into the ground to keep these balls in the air, and my brain is overwhelmed, and I get home and I've got nothing left in the tank for my kids. So, you know, I think really just finding people you can talk to or get coaching and unpack, like keep scratching away at the surface, because what you see on the surface level is not actually what is. It's like the iceberg effect. It's what's below the surface is the grit and the stuff that is going to be transformative, because that's what's required here is transformation, you know, like if this is the program that you're running and you want to run a new one, you have to transform. You've got to rewrite the program. So, you know, it's dealing with that under the surface iceberg that is what's going to make the difference on the surface.
Totes. I love that you said that too about the iceberg analogy, and also in finding the people for whom are living the reality that you want to, and finding out what's different. And I would also say to be even more specific beyond that is to ask them how they see this situation. What is the belief or the way in which they see the world that's different to you?
And the values. Right? What values do they hold on to? What values do they hold, and beliefs and values together? Because, you know, people will live in alignment with their values more than anything else. And often people think, you know, values are one thing and not another, but values are what you spend your time on. So, you know, if you're not spending your time, and to go back to the money story stuff, if you're not spending your time dealing with your money, then it's not getting dealt with, right? So it's not a value of yours. So if you've got money issues, you need to reorganize your values, right? And that might need some help. That might need some therapeutic help, working with a practitioner, like an NLP one, and, you know, and actually helping you, or even hypnosis, people can get help with that sort of stuff, for actually reprogramming and reinstalling other values that bring you into alignment with the life that you want to create. And remember, you know, like we said, these values often were instilled in us we didn't decide that. We didn't decide that. So if we decide that we want something else, and we're realizing that there's a mismatch, we need some values alignment. We need some belief alignment to reestablish and reshape and reframe the way we think about things in order for that reality to change on the surface.
That's amazing. Do you have any last questions, Bridgie, before we move into our quick-fire guest questions?
No, I think there's just so much to percolate on here, Sharon. Thank you so much.
I know. I was thinking in my head, then this is one of those episodes you're going to have to listen to 2 or 3 times, because you'll hear something different.
And also because no doubt our listeners, there'll be, you know, areas for you where you're feeling a bit activated, like as you listen and going, oh, fuck, like, you know, because I even imagine for you, Sharon, like admitting that you're that your chaos needed to be dealt with in some way and that you wanted to see a productivity coach, you know, would have required some courage to go, like, this feels like a shit show. I don't want to move like that anymore. And I'm willing for all of that stuff that I might have buried to be seen.
And that's transformation. Like, if we don't recognize the parts of us that need changing, then there is no change, you know, like there is no change unless we're willing to recognize and go, actually, this is a problem. It's like it's recovering from any addiction, right? Like that's what recovering from addiction looks like. It looks like I have a problem here. I need to get help. I need some new strategies or a new system that I can run to help me so that when this happens, I don't do that. You know, I do something that is moving me more in alignment with what I really want.
Yeah. God, I love that so hard. Yeah. So before we move into our quickfire questions, is there anything that you would like to wrap up with, Sharon?
No, not really. Other than to say that if anybody would like help with that, then you know, they're more than welcome to contact me, and we can do a session, just a one-off session, helping people to, you know, to get rid of some of these stories. We can, you know, there's a lot that we can do even in just one session. In terms of, again, it comes down to actually firstly recognizing what the problem is and the behaviors and thought patterns that come with it, and then working on reinstalling another one. And it's amazing what can be achieved in a very short space of time. Sometimes it takes longer, like it's no, you know, magic wand here, but certainly it's surprising what gains can be made, you know, in quite a quick space of time if we want them to. I turned productivity around on a dime, and I had years of conditioning of really poor productivity management. So, you know, I'm living proof that people can choose, you know, people can choose to live differently. It's a choice. What do you choose?
Totally, 100%. So I would love for you to share then how we connect with you and find you, and then we'll move into our guest quickfire questions.
Yeah. So SharonJoyCoaching.com or Sharon Joy Coaching on Instagram. Love to connect with Nourishing the Mother listeners.
Thank you. And we'll make sure we have those links in our show notes. So if you didn't quite catch them, you can just jump onto the show notes and they will be there. So let's begin. So question number one that we ask every podcast guest is there a time in your life that you'd be willing to share where you experienced a pain, a challenge, or a suffering, so a wound, that you found a process, a strategy, learnings through, out the other side, you've turned that wound into wisdom? And so what we're fascinated by, Bridgie and I, is what are the wounds? What have the people, when they've experienced those, learnt about life? And then how could we all gain wisdom from their experience and share that more broadly? So is there a time in your life that you'd be willing to share where you have turned a wound into wisdom?
I love that little bit of modeling too. Yeah, look, there is one actually, and I don't doubt that there's lots of your listeners that are teachers, and so I'll share this one. I had a pretty unfortunate thing that occurred towards the end of my teaching career, and I'd been kind of really weighing up what my options were as to whether I would stay in teaching. I had concerns about my longevity in the career, you know, really wondering how I was going to be, you know, working as a teacher at the rate that I was right up until retirement. And I was really enjoying the career. Don't get me wrong. I really enjoyed teaching, but I had reservations about staying in it forever. That was the thing, is I thought, I don't know if this is what I actually want to do forever. And I had a bit of an unfortunate thing that happened towards the end of that period of time. And, you know, it didn't really have anything to do with me, but I was sucked into the vortex, you know, and it had me really start to question whether I wanted to stay even more in the career. You know, I felt as though I felt quite vulnerable in a school, and without going into too much detail of what the incident was, but it was pretty unpleasant. So there was an investigation, and, you know, there was, you know, it went all the way. But, you know, I was not ever, you know, in any disciplinary issue or situation. But it took a terrible toll on my my mental health, on my physical health. It was really quite profound. You know, I have a high expectation of myself, and you know, I really, you know, I strive for excellence. Like, I don't apologize for that. Like, I have high standards. I have high standards of myself, and you know, I like to conduct my work with, you know, a high level of integrity, and so that was, you know, really soul destroying when that was, you know, that and other things were brought into question. So I really started to look, and, you know, I guess the reason I share this story is because often, you know, people will say, oh, there's something better on the horizon, you know, when you're in the throes of something really unpleasant, and frankly, you feel like you probably want to slap them, which is fair too. Like, it's the last thing you want to hear. But, you know, that particular incident actually is one of the catalysts that had me realizing that I wanted to change careers. And there was a couple of other things that happened, you know, positions coming up that I was thinking about going for, and then they got filled via a transfer. So I never actually got a shot at them. And I was like, hang on a minute here, there's something else going on. And I think the wisdom in this is, you know, when the chips are down, really, you know, I've learned to really just trust. And I hold on to that example so much in my day-to-day life now, that, you know, as low as things can get, just trusting that there's a reason that things unfold, and, you know, that there is really, you know, a way through even some of the deepest, darkest things. So, you know, I think that that's probably the example that I would give is, you know, just even when it's difficult, just believe that things do happen for a reason, and that there's light at the other end of the tunnel. And it's freaking wonderful, to be honest, because I couldn't imagine, like, this has brought me, oh, I can't even say, like, what I do now. I just, oh, it's just so amazing. You know, I had a wonderful career in teaching, but I just know that I've got the same ripple effect now in what I do, the work that I do, and I just love it, you know. And I think, wow, like, how lucky I can work from anywhere. You know, I'm, you know, full-time self-employed, and that's just something that, you know, when I was in teaching was merely a dream that I thought was the impossible dream.
Would I ask you just to share maybe a little bit more nuanced what it means to have faith? Like, how do you do that?
How do I do faith?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I'm very fortunate to say that's a gift that my mother gave me. So she rests in heaven, but, you know, that's a gift that my mother gave me. So
in terms of having a narrative around there's something larger than you.
Yeah, very much. Yeah, my mum was a Christian. She went to the Church of Christ, and she was rebaptized just a few weeks before she passed away. She passed away in 2013. But, you know, I was really raised with that sense of optimism. I guess, you know, faith sounds like optimism for people who faith doesn't align with as a word, as a construct. You know, so it sounds like optimism. It sounds like, you know what, this sucks right now, but everything's going to be okay. That there is something, there's either something in the wind or there's something external to me that's going to hold me through this. And, you know, I think one of the big mantras that I've held on to, as cliche as it is, but just choosing faith over fear. Just, you know, it just wins every time for me. Like, that's my process, is like, what can I choose right now? I can choose to have faith that this is going to work out, or I can live in fear, which nobody really enjoys unless it's a program that they're addicted to, I guess.
I love that so much. I just have one more question on that, if that's okay with you both.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So I find this fascinating because I have conversations in many different places and spaces where we talk about this generation of teens being spiritually starving and the impact that that has on their life, their choices, and how they navigate themselves in the world. So how have you instilled that faith? Does it look different to how your mum did that with you? And how do you pass that faith on for your children?
Yeah, well, I do have a teen. I've got a 16-year-old and I've got an 11-year-old daughter and a how old's I've got 2 birthdays this month, so I'm like, how old are my children? And an 8-year-old son. My 16-year-old is a daughter, and I think the thing is, look, I think my mum did it pretty well, to be honest.
What did she do?
Well, I think I can remember one of the last things that she said to me, was, "You'll be right." And I mean, she was like practically in a coma, and that's about all she could squeeze out. But that was her, she was, it was always, "You'll be right," but not in a sense where she didn't feel her feelings, right? Like my mum was a feeler. She felt everything, total empath. But even still, there was that sense of, okay, we can feel this, we can move through it, and then we can still be optimistic about what's to come. So, I think in terms of raising our children, family has been important, and I know that family can look different for different people. Maybe it's not biological family, maybe, that family construct is different. But for us and our family unit, like the 5 of us are very close. We traveled Australia and lived in a caravan for 2 years. That changed a lot of things. So, returning back to that, and sometimes faith looks like shutting out the outside world, and not allowing stuff to come in and penetrate from all angles. Sometimes it looks like being a little bit more insular and just breathing into that and going, right, here we are, we've got one another, and of course obviously anchoring into ourselves as well, but just taking that pause. And I mean, I guess we've modeled that for our kids. We've had some challenging situations in that, not only have we lost my mum, but, and 2 of my children lived through that. And I was, well, actually, no, I'm going to say 3 of my children lived through that, because I was 18 weeks pregnant with my son when we lost my mum. And, what transpired in that year was challenging and difficult, but, we had one in utero. And then I would say that, we also had another situation just a couple of years ago where Adam's, my husband's uncle, passed away, and with multiple sclerosis, and, we were very close to him. So, being together and sharing those experiences with our children and like showing them how we've navigated those challenging things is the way that we've taught our children.
Thank you.
So powerful. Now, moving on to our next question. What are the books that you feel everyone should read in their lifetime? What's been most influential for you?
Look, I'm going to say one that was written by a gentleman who actually was probably my first introduction to personal development, as in mainstream personal development. And what I understand now is, a lot of the techniques that he uses were aligned with NLP. But that would be this book, which is Mach 2 with Your Hair on Fire, by Richard Bliss Brooke. And, a lot of this is around how to master self-motivation and also the link between self-motivation and vision. So understanding, and I guess that really speaks to actually that analogy of the corrugated road. So having that vision, allowing us to stay motivated and stay moving in the direction of what we really want. So I've got a lot to thank Richard for. I was fortunate enough also to work with him, as well as this book. But I've shared it with a lot of clients, and for people who are not, overly in-depth readers or anything like that, it's about a 3-hour audiobook, and it's a great listen. And it also, speaks to things like values and gifts and beliefs and things as well, which, I truly believe is an integral part of any of that sort of transformative work. So very simple, Mach 2 with Your Hair on Fire by Richard Bliss Brooke.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you. Now, if you could have a billboard anywhere on a highway, what would it say?
Oh, it would probably just say, keep going. I've travelled right around Australia. I drove the Nullarbor myself. I actually drove 90 miles straight. I towed the caravan across that stretch of road. And, I think, the message is just keep going, because what is ahead is exciting and and beautiful. And even when we are in states of overwhelm, and even when we are, you know, in situations where the chips are down, there's beauty that is beyond. There really is.
I love that so much.
Just keep going.
That's what I think too. Right, Bridgie, isn't it? It's just...
It's almost like that stoic kind of like, just keep going.
Yeah,
like,
you just have faith in your
show
vision.
up and keep going.
And it doesn't have to look like force, you know?
No.
We can keep going with grace and confidence, and, you know, and there'll be times where we need someone to hold our hand and walk beside us. Like that's the human experience. But, you know, I think if we are to truly live in alignment with what we really want, then we're doing ourselves a disservice if we don't keep going. So, you know, getting really clear about what it is, where we're going, and we don't have to see every tiny spot and blip on the map, but we just at least need to see, you know, the main highways and, you know, the main route to get to where we want to go. And, you know, we don't have to go alone either, you know.
Oh, amen to that. Yeah. So Sharon, I really do want to say a big heartfelt thank you for coming and sharing your space, your energy, your time, and just your expertise on talking about what is it, you know, it's a sticky subject to talk about. And yet I think all three of us here also know that it's the crux to living your version of success in the life that you're here to live and choose to live, rather than feeling at the mercy of da-da-da-da-da. So I'm going to round out with one of Sharon's quotes that I just adored and wrote down, which was, free flow turns into free fall without a net. So go create your net.
Love that.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's so honoring to be here, and, you know, I just adore the work that you have, you know, in the world with both of your businesses, but also the podcast, sharing so much goodness for women right around the world. And yeah, it's just such an honor to be here. It's a pure joy. So thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Well, remember to nourish the woman to rock the family.
And we'll see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey.
Thank you so much for listening. We literally couldn't do this without you. Please share this podcast with anyone you think it would be medicine for.
If you desire to integrate your learnings practically and supportively into your life, then head on over to bridgetwood.life or julietenner.love to go deeper.
And if you feel like giving back a little to this free content, please rate us on iTunes or Facebook, all of which helps the podcast reach more mamas who need this type of tonic for the soul.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives.
Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.